New York Jets rookies have officially reported to training camp. Veterans will report on July 23rd, but today we have a very special show. ESPN senior reporter Jeremy Fowler will join me, who recently ranked every position room top 10 and then honorable mentions. Let's roll.
Jets, Jets, let's go.
Jets wide receiver Wesley Walker. Wesley, how you doing today? ESPN writer Mr. Rich Cimini, Jets reporter for The Athletic, Mr. Zach Rosenblatt, Hall of Famer and Jets legend Mr. Marty Lyons.
Your host, Connor Law.
Welcome in, everyone. Here we are. We are live on a Friday edition of NY Flight Jets Talk. Today I will be joined by ESPN senior reporter, Mr. Jeremy Fowler. Jeremy, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm good, Connor. Thanks for having me, man.
Of course, really appreciate it. You ready to get right into it?
Let's do it.
So you recently surveyed over 80 league executives, scouts, and coaches. This was your third year, I believe, of doing it, where you generated the top 10 of every player at every position, and then you followed that up with some honorable mentions. And there were definitely some ones that left Jets fans a little confused. But we're gonna start first with the edge rusher. Hassan Reddick was voted as an honorable mention, and personally, I thought he was snubbed by the executives. I mean, he's had over double-digit sacks the last 4 seasons. What do you think was the main cause for him not being in the top 10?
That's a good question. There's not always a rhyme and reason behind it. I think some of it was just the elite company and the number of players that put up double-digit sacks or 15-sack seasons. It was a very high number, almost twice as many as the year before when Hassan Reddick ranked 5th. Now, that year, he was the flavor of the month a little bit, right? Had a huge year with the Eagles. They went to the Super Bowl, and he was sort of the catalyst on defense. The next year, it's not like he played poorly. He certainly was very productive. It's tough to maintain that same momentum. And sometimes I've noticed these voters over the years, if a guy gets really hot, they might give him a chance and put him high. But the moment he cools off a little bit, they kind of go back to whatever their biases were or however they felt, as opposed to like a TJ Watt or Micah Parsons or guys that are blue chip of the blue chip players. They're always going to be high no matter what they do. But, this year was tough. Like number 9 was Trey Hendrickson. He had a huge number of sacks. Brian Burns was the tough one at 10. He didn't have a great year, but certainly he was 6 or 7 in past years. Big time ability. Khalil Mack had 17 sacks or whatever it was, and he didn't make the list. So the competition was different. I just think it's a byproduct of that, not necessarily anything Hassan did wrong.
Yeah, and now also staying on the defensive side of the ball, Quincy Williams made the first team All-Pro this season and still couldn't crack the top 10. And also, Mosley was an honorable mention, but I personally thought there was a decline in his play from 2022 to 2023. Okay. I mean, how did the first team All-Pro like Williams, have you noticed it over the past couple of years? How does a player of his caliber not crack the list?
Well, probably a couple reasons. I would say after the first 2 guys, which is Fred Warner in San Francisco and Roquan Smith in Baltimore, there's a huge drop-off, and like 3 through 15 could have been any number of players. So it was very close, and he just, for whatever reason, didn't get enough votes. He had a decent amount of top 10 votes, but not quite enough. He's looked at as an explosive hitter, a good young player. Sometimes you can follow the money a little bit. He got a nice contract, but it wasn't like a huge amount of money that he got coming off of this last year. I think it was a pretty reasonable 3-year deal, where some of the bigger guys on the list, they get paid as such because they have a higher ceiling. So I think certainly Quincy has maximized his skill set moving forward and can continue to do so, but he's not quite looked at as that sort of exotic, scheme transcendent type player you can fit in any system, and he's going to be great. CJ Mosley was, you're not alone in thinking that maybe there was a little decline last year. I've heard some scouts say the same thing, but he's just such a good player and so smart that it was hard for a lot of people to leave off the list. And he was very close to getting that 10th spot, just based on his intangibles and what he does for a defense. And I know the Jets felt like he didn't slow down. Yeah. They felt like he maintained his play.
Yeah, and then another one who I think he was actually pretty high on the list, but I definitely think he could have earned that 2 spot. Sauce Gardner, he was ranked 2nd on the list last year and ranked 3rd this year. Both seasons he's earned first team All-Pro and a Pro Bowl. So 2-time first team All-Pro and 2-time Pro Bowler. The main thing that sticks out to me personally in Sauce's play from 2022 to 2023 was he didn't have an interception in 2023,
Yeah,
which he had in 2022. Do you think that's the main reason he wasn't able to surpass Denzel Ward for that 2
I think
spot?
that's part of it. The ball production. Some people thought he didn't play great early in the year. I know some people with the Jets agree with that, although he certainly turned it on, had a great season.
Yeah.
It's a byproduct of there not really being a dominant, surefire Hall of Fame type cornerback right now. Even Patrick Surtain, number one, didn't have a great year.
Yeah.
He's just more like teams would pick him first if they were starting a team from like the elementary school field and you're picking kickball players, right? Like he's the first
Yeah.
corner you're going to take because he's got probably the best ability. But Denzel Ward in Cleveland beating Sauce Gardner, I did not expect that when I started. It's just, there were some executives that I trust that didn't think he was top 10 last year even or moving forward. They just thought, he like the holding thing is a sort of a thing now. Marlon Humphrey mentioned it. A few executives pointed that out. Maybe that's unfair, because a lot of people you can hold on every play and
Yeah.
it's sort of splitting hairs. He's clearly elite and a great player. He came in third, which is hardly bad.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to be 2, and he fell a spot for me. So
Yeah, and you mentioned in that same article, an NFL talent evaluator told you he is one of the most quote overrated players in the league. Do you agree with that statement? Or are you kind of with the Jet fans there?
I don't necessarily agree with it, no,
Okay.
because I don't think he's done anything to earn an overrated
Yeah.
reputation. But he got a lot thrown at him early. I'll put it this way, I don't think Derek Stingley in Houston, who was drafted 1 spot ahead of him 2 years ago. I think if he was in New York, he'd be looked at as a top guy too. So I think he's gotten a lot of credit for being in New York and having a fun nickname and being an exciting player. That's not a knock on him. I just think he's gotten a lot of credit early on. So maybe he's regressed to the mean a little bit. He gets knocked for the system he's in. Playing one side. Kind of, Richard Sherman used to get knocked a little bit for the same thing. Probably unfair, but I think when you're picking for this exercise, especially a cornerback, teams look for somebody where, they're flexible. You can put them in any situation, in the slot, zone coverage, man coverage, different looks. You can throw them in there. They're going to not only make it work, but be great. So I think there's some questions about Sauce's flexibility in that way.
Yeah, now one more thing before we get into the current Jets team as a whole right now entering training camp. Going over to the offensive side of the ball, Garrett Wilson was ranked as an honorable mention, and personally I agree with that. I think he's a very talented wide receiver. He's surpassed over 1,000 yards with over 7 quarterbacks, I believe it is, in 2 years in the league, and he's been great. But there's so many talented receivers in the league right now. You saw Brandon Ayuk listed at 10. We'll get into that a little later. What do you think the main thing is that separates Wilson from that top 10 level?
Just bad quarterback play. I mean, I really think that's probably it. Like, I think if he had Aaron Rodgers for a full year, he might be top 7 right now, and we wouldn't be complaining. Major talent. He's sort of been buried in New York. Whereas Breece Hall got a high ranking because, in part, he got more opportunities. The running game isn't totally dependent on the quarterback in that way. You can still get yards where Garrett was dependent on who's throwing it to him. So I didn't really hear any flaws in his game. It's just part of it's just the receiver position is so loaded. You got 30 guys, I think, that got votes or close to that, 25 to 30 guys. So, you got guys that are getting 1,300 yards, 1,400 yards and getting left off the list. So it's just really competitive. And he probably was about where he needed to be. But I think he'll be top 10 next year. I really do.
Yeah, now staying with wide receiver room, entering camp, the Jets put 3 players on the PUP list, physically unable to perform. One of those players being Mike Williams, who the Jets added in free agency this offseason. From what you're hearing, what do you think is a proper timetable for Williams' return? Do you think we'll see him active for week 1?
My guess is they'll take it pretty slowly with him. I mean, I think his goal, from what I understand, was to try to make week 1. So he'd have to make a lot of progress in the next few weeks. They'll take it week by week, but it wouldn't shock me if they had to give him a month or put him on short-term IR maybe to start. Certainly they're willing to play the long game with him, and his contract's got some incentives in it, I believe, so he's going to be motivated to get back in a hurry, and perform. And he's a major ad. I mean, the guy's a massive talent when he's healthy. So I think the Jets want to get the best of him when he's ready, and they're not going to push it.
Yeah, with that being said, the Jets have kind of been linked to some wide receivers via rumors these past weeks, whether it was Devontae Adams, who his agent proceeded to kind of shut down those rumors, but after that, Adams went on the Club Shay Shay podcast and said he's pretty content in Vegas right now, but if he was to reunite with anyone, it would be with Aaron Rodgers. So that's
Yeah.
really interesting, I think, because Adams, I don't know if you saw that clip of him on that Netflix show. I mean, that was before they hired Antonio
Yeah.
Pierce, but still, what he was using is kind of undeniable there. And then the other name is Brandon Ayuk, who recently
Yeah.
requested a trade out of the 49ers organization. And ESPN insider Dan Graziano had the Jets listed as a, quote, trade fit for Ayuk.
Yeah.
Could you see any way where the Jets land one of those guys to kind of solidify that 2 spot with
Yeah.
Williams' injury kind of being questionable?
Well, it's funny. I'm trying to bring up the Jets depth chart here to make sure I'm not missing anybody, but I think they're too deep at the position is pretty good. Like, you still have to account for Alan Lazard. I know he had an awful year last year, but he was signed to pair with Aaron Rodgers because he knows Aaron Rodgers' timing and his signs and the nuances of the line of scrimmage. He knows what Aaron wants. So I think he'll be a factor. So you have him. You got Garrett Wilson as the 1. You got Mike Williams as the 2, assuming he's healthy. I don't know that you need Devontae Adams or Brandon Ayuk, especially for a team that's given up draft picks in the past in trades. Like, they've drafted good players for the most part. They've had a few misses, but they've had some really big hits, and that's why Joe Douglas is still there. With the guys we're talking about, Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner. So he gets credit for all those. He had a great class. So I don't know if you want to give up all that much more. When you traded it for Hassan Reddick, you gave up draft capital for that. It just, at some point you need to keep your picks, and you have enough at receiver. They got Malachi Corley they're really excited about. Xavier Gibson they are really excited about. So they got enough, I think.
Speaking of picks, this offseason, the Jets traded several draft picks to the Philadelphia Eagles in exchange for star edge rusher Hassan Reddick. He was absent for OTAs and minicamp. The main concern, really, his current contract. Veterans are set to report on July 23rd. Do you see Reddick reporting to camp on the 23rd?
Ooh, probably. Don't hold me to that. It's a lot of money to forfeit. And he is waiting on a new deal that's not a guarantee to get. So it's different if you're, CeeDee Lamb right now, right? Like, if he sits out, you kind of understand it because he's trying to get a contract of $33 to $35 million a year that he's probably going to get. So if you forfeit $600,000, it's like, okay, well, you could probably get that back. And Zach Martin with Dallas held out last year and got a new deal. Where in New York, I don't know. I mean, he's enough of a wild card where it wouldn't shock me. I would be mildly surprised that a lot of these guys hold out. I just don't think there are going to be a ton of them. I think what you see is the hold in where they show up and withhold their services on the practice field and don't work out because they say they have a hamstring issue or whatever it is. Most agents don't want to cost their players money out of their own pocket. So they have them report and pull a hamstring or whatever you got to do to not get on the practice field.
Now, let's say Reddick decides, okay, I'm holding out, I want this deal. What do you think the Jets get done with Reddick? Because personally, I don't think they ink him to like a Danielle Hunter 2-year, whatever crazy amount of money deal that was. I think they kind of just guarantee some money in his current deal. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that I think your inclination is good. I think they will sort of try to tease this out, give him a incentive to show up, literally and figuratively, to just try to sweeten his deal. I just don't get the sense that they've been overly eager to do a long-term contract. They want to see how he fits. But I don't know. It's complicated because they knew when they traded for him that he was having contract issues with Philly, that he wanted a new deal. So it's like you knew what you were getting into. I think if it's something that's reasonable, they would do it. I don't think they would give him the Danielle Hunter deal right now. At least I'd be pretty surprised. But look, they're paying into a corner because they gave up a lot to get him too. So they have to do something. Typically, if you're willing to throw some more money in to work it out for 1 year, you can get it done. But he's pushing 30. I don't know. I forget the exact age, but he's close. So, there's urgency for him to do something. But I still think he could play it right where if he can get a sweetener on a 1 year, get some more money now, have a big year, hit free agency, and get major coin.
Yeah, now, Jeremy, are you hearing any buzz around the Jets that, you'd be comfortable sharing with the listeners right now going into camp?
About Hassan Reddick or just in general?
About the team in general.
Let's see. I wish I had some more scoop for you. I mean, it's pretty quiet right now. What was I thinking about? I think they're going to have everybody report. I'd be surprised. Who else is coming back from injury?
You
What are
have
the
you have
major?
Mike Williams. You have Chuck Clark, who the Jets re-signed to a 1-year deal,
Chuck
who's supposed
Clark.
to be in line to be the starting safety, who hasn't appeared in a game in over a year. So that's definitely a storyline to watch.
DJ Reed's one to watch.
Okay.
He
Yeah.
wants a new deal and he's played well. But they also have talked to Michael Carter, the slot corner. I think one of those two will get paid. I don't know about both, but I think they'll try to figure something out with one of them. Could be DJ, because they really value him. So that's my only mini scoop I got for you, is to watch the second cornerback spot and follow the money.
Jeremy, I really appreciate you joining me. Before we get to your final thoughts, I'm starting a new signature question kind of on this podcast, and you're going to be the first one I shoot the question to.
Okay.
4 dinner guests, dead or alive, anyone in the world, who are you taking?
Ooh, 4 dinner guests. Let's see. I would probably go Michael. I'd start with Michael Jordan.
Okay.
Because it'd just be entertaining.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's tough. Colin Powell, I've always really respected him.
Mm-hmm.
And just all the stories he probably has from a military standpoint.
Yeah.
So that's 2. Boy, that's tough. Who's a good head coach? Be funny.
Mike Tomlin?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in a dinner setting with Mike Tomlin because I used to cover the Steelers, so at least I've had that experience. Man, I mean, I kind of want to say Aaron Rodgers, honestly, because he's
I like it.
Even if some people think he's full of it a little bit, I think it would at least be very entertaining. I'm looking for an entertaining dinner.
Yeah.
People say some off the wall stuff I'm okay with, just for entertainment value solely.
Yeah.
So I'll go Rodgers, Michael Jordan, Colin Powell. That'd be an interesting crew. And then Kendrick Lamar.
Love it. Kendrick Lamar. So your team Lamar in the Drake battle.
For sure.
Kendrick battle. Like
For
it.
sure.
But
It was an easy win, It was an easy win.
Yeah. Jeremy, really appreciate you joining me. You got any final thoughts to share with everyone?
No, I just think the Jets their roster's ready to win. I really do feel like that. In the past I might have said that, but not meant it, but now I do mean it.
Yeah.
I mean, just doing this top 10 exercise I did, every position they got an honorable mention at least, including with left tackle with Tyron Smith.
Oh.
So they made a case for almost 9 top 10 players, which is impressive. So it's ready to go. It really is a team that should be at the very least playoff or bust, maybe even Super Bowl or bust. I'm not picking them to win the Super Bowl, but it wouldn't shock me if they make a January run.
Okay. Really, Jeremy, really appreciate you joining me. Know how busy you are. Everyone, thank you guys for watching. And as always, JTS, Jets.
Thanks for having me.